For most Black Americans, especially those in the South, the front porch isn't just part of the entry into the house. It is the place we enter community. It's not just the comfort or safety we experience there, but it's where we do some people watching and good reflection. On the front porch is where we tell the truth with a little sweetener and an awesome time along the way. We take what we learn and we act. On this episode, we discuss all things related to youth, education, community, and the politics of people.
Welcome back to another episode of On the Front Porch with KaCey. Well, y'all, a lot has happened, and I always want to make sure that what I'm sharing with you is relevant and is timely. And last night, I watched the Emmys. Now, I don't normally watch award shows. I just feel like they have become a spectacle in a sense. I don't watch a lot of TV anymore. As we think about the Emmys, when it comes to the Grammys, I like who I like. And so I don't always know the artists, both performing and musical artists, that are being celebrated and highlighted at a lot of these award shows. But I started to see a lot of the buzz for the Emmys. One, because Kenan from Kenan and Kel and Saturday Night Live, and he's Atlanta homegrown. He was hosting, and then I saw some buzz about Lizzo winning an Emmy for her special, and then I saw the buzz around Queen Cheryl Lee Ralph winning. I was like, okay, let me go find these YouTube clips really quickly, because I know folks upload things really fast after these award shows. And I was just so amazed, motivated, inspired by Ms. Ralph's acceptance speech, particularly the song that she decided to sing even before she uttered a spoken word. And I'm pretty sure there's a lot of buzz in the comment section. Folks who don't understand how and why those of us who identify as African American or Black or part of the diaspora communicate so much through song and music. There are some things that we just can't convey with words alone. It has to be this utterance from our gut and from our soul. And a lot of times that comes out in a song or a moan or a hum. And so for me, it was appropriate. For me, it spoke volumes to who she is, what she stands on, what she believes in, for that to be her introduction to her acceptance speech and to her thank yous for support. And it got me thinking about things that are just innately who we are. It's a part of us, and how it shows up in various forms of relationships, communication, engagement. There's some things we just can't put a lid on. There's some things we can't fight the urge around anymore. There's some things that is like, even if you don't understand it, this is just how it has to be. And it reminded me of that on yesterday. But then it started this rabbit hole of thinking around why we do what we do as Black folks in this country, as Black folks across this world. And a lot of it is already embedded in our DNA. You've heard me talk in earlier episodes around the post-traumatic slave syndrome and slave trauma being embedded in our DNA. And it's actually called epigenetics, right? There's a word for it, not just making it up. And that doesn't mean we play victim, right? Even as we think about the song that Miss Cheryl Lee Ralph sung yesterday, that was actually written by Diane Reeves. It's not about us playing victim because trauma maybe embedded in our DNA. It's about understanding that that plays a part in how we respond and how we show up and how we do what we do. Now, can't blame it all on that, right? Because just like I tell other people, something could have happened to you in your childhood. That was not your fault. How you still continue to deal with it as an adult is, right? It's our response to it. So just because we understand that it's there doesn't mean that it gives us free reign or a pass to act a fool whenever we want to, because trauma is embedded in our DNA. Before I get to what I want to read to you all, that right there that I just said to you reminds me of this TikTok reel that one of my good friends sent to me, and it was a young lady who literally had crawled through a drive-through window because they forgot to give her ranch. Now, the scene for this entire video was just wrong. From her walking barefoot on that nasty floor, okay, to her putting her car in park, to literally climb through, y'all, the drive-through window. Not she was inside the restaurant lobby and walked behind the counter. This child put her car in park, climbed through the window with her car running, threatening to throw hot grease on a restaurant worker because they forgot ranch. And I'm like, why is it always us? Now, I know some of y'all probably gonna be real upset by that statement I just made, but let's just be honest. Some stuff we hear, be it right or wrong, be it falling into stereotypical generalizations or not, there's some things that we hear and we say, oh, I bet they white. There's some things that we hear and we say, I know that was one of us. And had someone described this video to me before I saw it, I would have clearly said that was one of us. Now, my question is, baby girl ain't got no friends. She ain't never had no grandmama, no auntie that really knew how to put their foot in her behind, figuratively and literally, for her to think that that was acceptable and for her to respond in her frustration that way. There's something that's embedded in her DNA, either by nurture or nature, that allowed her, emboldened her, empowered her. Something in her mind told her, you know what? Oh, yes, this is how I get what I want. Or even if some still small voice said to her, child, you doing too much. There was still something greater that said, yeah, but I gotta act a fool because I feel disrespected because they forgot my ranch. I liken that to the gentleman, and I use that term loosely, who took the life, and altered the life of another young lady over too much mayonnaise. Like, what in your brain? What in your history? What in your trauma? What in your DNA said, I feel disrespected by mayonnaise, so much so that I'm going to end your life. I'm befuddled and bewildered, confused, toiling in my mind. What could have possibly happened to you or didn't that would make you say it's okay for me to pull a weapon that has deadly power behind too much mayonnaise? Or let me leave my car running in a drive-through, climb through the window because they forgot my ranch. Now, again, these are a set of circumstances that these two individuals need to own wholly and solely on themselves, right? But being who I am and the work that I do, it still makes me wonder, what in your history made you think that that was okay? And as we begin to unravel those pieces, was missing? What was missing? Did it start off when you was 18 months and they just let you do what you wanted to do because they thought it was cute? And in your brain, as it was developing, you began to think unconsciously that, oh, ain't nobody gonna stop me. In the words of Sheree, who gonna check me, boo? Right? So the whole idea of how far back do we go? Maybe this was learned behavior. Maybe her mama acts a whole fool. Maybe it's her mama and her grandmama who cut up every time somebody don't do what they want them to do in the way they want it done. And other folks have given in to their foolishness through this behavior. And so it was learned because her mama did it and her grandmama did it. Or maybe her grandmama, her mama got tired of trying to tell her what to do. So it's just like, well, whatever. And so now she has no sense of accountability. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out, right? Not saying that it's true or not, that it's right or wrong, that it's fact or fiction. I'm just taking y'all on a journey through my own mind of what would have persuaded this young woman to climb through a drive-through window behind some ranch. And we can say all day that people make stupid decisions. They do. I try to not use that word as often, or I try not to use it often at all, right? Because I understand the connotation behind it. But some stuff is stupid. Like, let's just call it what it is. There's some things that are unwise, right? Decisions. There are some things that we can tell you did not do your research around, and so you made an ignorant decision, right? We can chalk some things up to just being dumb, right? Like, you thought it was funny, thought it was silly, but it really isn't, right? And then there's just some things that are stupid. And for me, that classifies as that, right? Stupid. But I still can't get my mind to move past what happened or didn't happen. I want to meet her mama. I do. I want to meet her mama and her grandmama and her aunties and all the women in the community that help raise her, because y'all know we don't raise our kids by ourselves. Even when we say, don't tell my child nothing, somebody else is still helping to raise that child. Where those people at? That's who I want to talk to. That's who I want to meet. Because I want to know. Somebody, somewhere, told her that acting a complete fool was the way to go. Now, it could be some other things there, right? So let's just give her some grace. This could be the effects of long-term drug use. We know that deteriorates your brain cells. This could have been acting out because of an episode around a mental health challenge, right? And if that's the case, then yes, baby girl needs help, professional help, and quickly. And I'm not a therapist. I'm not anybody's licensed doctor, so I can't make a diagnosis from a 15-second clip on TikTok. But to me, it just looked like somebody who was used to doing whatever she wanted to do. And that's how she gets her way. I said all that to also say that there's some good things that can come from embedded experiences and embedded trauma. And one of those things is something that was written for my family reunion back in 2019. And y'all know I love talking about my family. I love the history of my family. You know, my mom right now is working to get a designation of the neighborhood I grew up in to be on the National Historic Register. And she's doing so because Beechwood literally was birthed out of 5 sharecropping families that were brothers and cousins. And from those 5 sharecropping families, They literally had to clear the beechwood trees off of the land in order to build homesteads for their families. One of the few communities in the state of Virginia that acquired their land that way as sharecroppers, right? Right after the abolishment of slavery, these Black folks were given the opportunity to own their own land. And I'm grateful that that's the block, the neighborhood that I had a chance to grow up in. So when I think about things that are embedded in our DNA, it's not just the trauma. It's also the tenacity. It's the determination. It's the will. It's the grit, right? It is the commitment to make something better than how we found it, to continue legacy, to be able to tell the story, to point back, right? If we think about Sankofa, right? Have you ever seen the Sankofa bird? Its body is moving forward with its head turned back. Not because it misses what is in the past, but is there to understand that we don't ever have to repeat it. And so as I thought about all of the good things that also get passed down in our DNA as a result of some trauma that we experienced as a people. Folks want to debate all the time whether or not we're still feeling the effects of being enslaved in this country, utilizing slavery to build wealth for many folks that do not look like us. And don't misunderstand me. There were some Black folks that also owned slaves and understood the economics, right, of it. So I'm not one of those people that looks at one thing and not understands the totality of it. But by and large, the percentage of Black folks owning slaves and using it as an economic vehicle was minute in comparison to others who owned slaves and owned our Black bodies as commodities. Okay? So if we're going to tell it, let's just tell it all. Yes, let's acknowledge it all, but don't act like for every one white slave owner, you had a Black slave owner. Like, that's the part that bothers me. I mean, there's always an exception to the rule. I mean, hell, Candace Owens and, Herschel Walker and, and before y'all calm all in my comments about me likening them to Black slave owners, I'm just saying there's an exception to every rule. We all are not monoliths. We don't think the same all the time. And you can't put us all in a Democratic box and a liberal box, right? You can't say we all act like the child that climbed through the window. And so I can acknowledge that, yes, there are some of us that did some horrific things. But I ain't about to let everybody else off the hook because of that. I was riding in the car, and here in Atlanta, there is a news show, right? And I want to be careful because I don't want anybody to sue me because I ain't got no money. But there's a news show, it's a talk radio show. And there was a host on there who was talking about how he wasn't invited to preview The Woman King about the Dahomey tribe and, starring Viola Davis that is coming out this Friday. And he just wonders, right? Because it got 100% Rotten Tomatoes rating, which means that critics love this movie. And he wonders, did this movie tell the whole story? And so he was teeing it up, right? And what he was teeing up was the fact that, let me backtrack. He brought this story up because we know that the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II, has transitioned. I'm going to hold my thoughts about that as I sip my Hey Hydrate water. Let me lubricate my vocal cords before I get in trouble. So he was talking about that and how folks around the world had some disparaging things to say about the Queen who has transitioned. and about how she upheld a monarchy that made their wealth on the backs of, colonizing other countries, stealing jewels from the continent of Africa, and not allowing for countries to be sovereign and to rule themselves. So he brought that up because he also wanted to talk about how the British had went to Western Africa and closed the ports, right, to keep the Dahomies from exporting their biggest commodity, their biggest crop, which is the word that he used, which were slaves. Now, those of us who know history know that, yes, there were slave owners in Africa. There were Black people who led other Black people to ports. And in exchange for money or freedom, they gave Black folks to white folks that were sailing the seas, right? Which is how all of our beautiful melanated complexions have ended up all across this world, right? Because we got dropped off in different places. Okay, yeah, we know this. Okay, we know that happened. It's not new information to those of us who understand who we are and where we come from. Now, we can debate that slavery in Africa wasn't as inhumane as it was here in the Americas. I don't know. I wasn't there, right? I'm not going to get into all of that. But yes, okay, that's a fact. Yeah, the Dahomey tribe sold Black folks. And they sold slaves, which is how they made revenue. But sir, that does not absolve white American slavery. Look, you're not getting ready to make me sit back and say, oh, we should never talk about Thomas Jefferson ever again. Right? He had the nerve to bring up Wilberforce, if you're not familiar, who actually wrote the lyrics to Amazing Grace. Now, his whole life got turned upside down. Like, this is a man who had a whole Job experience. Like, his wife died, his kids died, like, he lost everything, which is why he wrote the song Amazing Grace. Like, literally, if you get past the first stanza of it and, like, really look at the lyrics and the words to it, you can tell for yourself that this man had an experience. And so the song came because he had a conversion experience, right? So thank God for that. But they don't absolve you from the fact that you own slaves. And yes, he became an abolitionist and all of that. And so, okay, I appreciate that, but that still does not atone wholly, in my book, for what happened. And so for folks to say that we're still not impacted by trauma that happened to us hundreds of years ago. Oh, and I really don't want to say hundreds of years ago because I feel like slavery just changed its name to Jim Crow after the Reconstruction period. And I feel like we really have only been walking in our full freedom as a entity. Now, again, there's an exception to every rule. So miss me with the, well, what about this? What about that? As a whole, right? Probably since the late 1960s, okay? Which has not been a long time in the grand scheme of things. And so I can understand how and why this question around equity is necessary, because there is no equal footing, because I still don't have the same resources and the same starting point that a white counterpart of mine had. And that's not to say some white folks have not had some hellish experiences. That's not to say that there are not some poor white folks in this country. That's not to say that there aren't white folks who work and scrape and grind for every single thing that they have and every single thing that they have accomplished, right? Not taking that away, that there's some folks that gotta bust their tail, even if they are white. But again, as a whole, not speaking about the exceptions, white folks have not had to figure out how to overcome hundreds of years of trauma to just be able to be. So this is not a victim song. This is a song of triumph that in spite of it all, I recognize the trauma. I understand what it is. I understand how it can show up in my life if I'm not conscious and aware of it, to then do the work to ensure that it does not continue to be a stumbling block for as much as I can control, because there's still some systematic and some institutionalized things that we need to fix. Like, I'm not convinced yet that we there. No matter how much we talk about equity, no matter how many corporations have a DEI department that only wants to talk about how to use, certain identifiers in the proper way, but we don't want to do the real work for some of these corporations that have been up and running for over 100 years. Like, how do you make your money? What? Oh, okay. So anyway, I say all that to say that even amongst all the trauma, there are some awesome things embedded in our DNA. And as I go back to, because I know y'all think I'm off on a tangent, I don't know where I'm going and I'm not connecting the dots, but bam, here we go. So as I go back to what was written for my family's reunion in 2019, it reminds me that even amidst of what has happened to us as a family and as a people, something amazing can, will, and will continue to come out of this lineage and this DNA of what it means to be Black in America, to be Gullah Geechee in the southern states. And I'm proud of who we are. I'm proud of what we were able to contribute. And for me, I draw my strength from that, and from even the things that my mother is doing currently to demand that people see what Beechwood is, what we accomplished, who we are. Okay? So here we go. It's called The Story of Us. By now, you all know that we are the descendants of slaves. But listen now for the rest of the story. In Africa, we were hunted. We were hunted for what we knew how to do, for what we could do better than any tribe along the coast of West Africa. We were hunted for our technology, hunted for our skilled labor. In America, they called it the Carolina Gold. At today's rates, Carolina Gold is a multi-billion-dollar food crop called rice. A rice that isn't quite long grain. It's hardy and so versatile in what you can do with it that it was sold throughout the United States and in international markets. But only we knew, as West Africans, how to plant it, how to harvest it, how to process this crop called rice. It was us who brought the mortar and the pestle technology to the United States, used to pound rice until the grains behaved. Us who brought grass weaving technology, used to create fanners that separated the rice from its hull. Us who brought delta cultivation techniques, clearing swamps of trees, designing the canals and ditches and banks and floodgates to control the tides, building dams to protect this gold from salt water during high tide. At the Port of Charleston, it was our foremothers and forefathers who brought the highest prices, and so it was us that they hunted and kidnapped and enslaved and brought to that port, sold off to fledgling rice plantations in Mount Pleasant, right where we stand today. When we arrived at the part of Charleston, we did not speak English. We didn't even speak Gullah. We spoke the language of our tribes. And when these colonists, these kidnappers, discovered that we were communicating with one another, they would sell us off in pieces. A father to this plantation, a mother to another, disrupting the family unit, disrupting any sense of community. But we were resilient. We took what we learned in English and what we remembered from Africa and created Sea Island Creole, or what is now referred to as the Gullah language. Now, footnote, the word Gullah is said to be a variant of the name Angola, an African country. This was a language that only we understood, that allowed us to speak freely, an encoded language, a secret language that we could use even in the presence of our kidnappers or buckras. Some of our words have made their way into the English language. Our word goober, referring to peanut in English. Our word gumbo, referring to okra in English. Or our word tote, to carry in English. Yam, the sweet potato in English. Because y'all, there's a difference between a yam and a sweet potato. And bubba, meaning brother in English. Even kumbaya, come by here, my Lord, come by here, was originally a Gullah shout song. It was a work holler that we used to cope. So how do we become free? After centuries of enriching these colonists with our technology and our skilled labor, how did we capture freedom? It was not because of the Civil War or the Emancipation Proclamation. Some of our ancestors were free well before then. Yes, a few of them escaped and fled to the north, and others were set free because of a specialized skill that the owner could profit from, or maybe as a human gesture at the end of an old slave's life. But most of the ancestors, those freed before slavery was abolished, were freed, manumitted because of miscegenation. You see, it wasn't enough for us to till their soil for profit. These enslavers also fathered children with their slaves and later freed them, usually upon their death. And our family was no different. So, let's meet Samuel Venning Sr., a white English settler. In 1760, he moved from England to Savannah, Georgia, with a wife and 3 children. 3 years later, he, his wife, and daughter were killed during a massacre by Native Americans. His remaining children, 2 teenage sons, Nicholas and Samuel Venning Jr., avoided death by hiding in a hogshead and later made their way to Charleston, South Carolina, where, as orphans, they were taken in by the Vanderhorst family of Christ Church Parish. Like most colonists of the day, Samuel Venning Jr. grew up as a landowner. But Samuel Venning Jr. also fathered children with his slaves. Those are our foremothers. How do we know? Because in 1818, he left a will. In it, he directed his children to manumit and set free Sue and her children, or forfeit the estate he left to them. He also provided a fund for the support of Sue and her children during her old age and their minority. So, even before any war or proclamation, our foremothers and their children were oftentimes set free because she bore the slave owner's children, and the mulatto children were his own. And so, this was the tradition for Samuel Venning Jr. and his lineage. His son, Robert Morrell Venning, owned slaves who bore his children. And so did his son, William Crawford Venning, my third great-grandfather. William Crawford Venning was born almost 200 years ago in 1825. Now, footnote, I used to ask my daddy why his eyes were green and sometimes looked hazel, why he had this really unique curl pattern to his hair. And he would always just say, my granddaddy white. And as a child, I didn't understand that because I didn't see a lot of white people in our family in terms of like lineage, like blood, DNA. And then I would look at my brother and look at my sister and I would look at some of my other family members and I'm like, okay. Anyway, back to the story. William Crawford Venning was born almost 200 years ago in 1825. He lived right here in Mount Pleasant on his family's plantation at Remley's Point. He was a church deacon. He was a lieutenant in the Confederate Army, and he owned slaves. He married Sarah Dorrell Wilden, a white woman, and together they had 8 children. But William Crawford Venning, like his father and grandfather, also bore children with his slaves. One of those children was Robert Venning, born in 1850 in one of 6 slave cabins on that very same plantation, later listed as mulatto and free. This Robert Venning, the mulatto, is my second great-grandfather. And here, dear cousins, is one of the great divides in the Venning line. Robert Venning, the mulatto, had a son named Edward Venning, listed as Negro, who had a son named Robert G. Venning, my granddaddy. And all 3 descendants of William Crawford Venning, the white slave owner, church deacon, and Confederate war lieutenant. But in today's heritage databases, William Crawford Venning and Sarah Dorrell Wilden Venning are listed as having 8 white children with no mention of his mulatto or black issue. But we know, standing here today, that we too are his great-great-great-great-grandchildren. We know that we come from a long line of white English colonists named Venning, and a line of technologically advanced, highly skilled West Africans who were resilient. We know that it was our technology and our skilled labor that enriched the Venning family and this low country. So stand tall, dear Vennings, for today we're standing at the root of the tree, free. So that was written for us by my cousins to remind us that while our family lineage is muddled and a mix of a lot of stuff, it's what's been embedded in us that makes the difference of how we show up, how we engage in this world. Right? I don't have to be mad about the blood that runs through my veins. Right? I take that blood and I pull the best of everything from it to allow me to continue to do what I do. You know, I tell people all the time, don't get mad at me when, I decide to nut because you bucked. Like, it's embedded in my DNA, right? Don't get mad at me if I give you a lot of grace. And when that grace runs out, you see a whole entire different side of me. It's embedded in my DNA, right? Don't get mad at me because I cannot be confined to a 9 to 5 and wait for somebody else to tell me what to do. It's embedded in my DNA. And I understand the need for me to have to sometimes put my hands to the plow physically, to move things, manipulate things, touch things, right? People look at me and it's like, why are you doing that? Because it's something about the movement. It's something about the skill. It's something about knowing that I physically put my hands to it that calms and soothes my soul. But I also understand where it comes from. I understand the need to build something, right? Comes from my daddy. I understand the need to teach. It comes from my mama. And I understand the need to stand up and dare anybody, black, white, purple, polka dot stripe, to tell me what I can and cannot do. Because I come from a lineage of people, both from the Ames and from the Vennings, who remind me that we go and we take what belongs to us. We stand fully in who we are at all costs. And that from the beginning, we have been special and set apart and sacred. And I dare not be the one to stop it. So I want you to think about what's embedded in your DNA, what's embedded in who you are, who you be. And then how does that cause you to show up strong here in the earth? All right. Talk to you guys next time on another episode of On the Front Porch with KaCey.